And while we're on that point, I have a little quibble with your textbook author. Your textbook author writes in a critical tone, for now at least, I'm quoting Mr. O'Neill, for now at least, the evolution away from models that describe politics and toward those that analyze it and compare its role in different countries is hard to see. Despite hopeful changes, half the articles in American comparative politics journals remain primarily descriptive and focused on a single country. Why do I object? Well, because getting description right, really understanding what's going on in individual countries and small groups of countries is the only way that we can have the kind of accurate descriptive material that allows us to build these good theories. And so theorizing based on thin description is not a very productive undertaking. It's really hard to theorize with thick description, with lots of detail, but it is the detail that really contains the truth of human life. And so this idea that, we should be moving away from description and toward explanation, and that description should be a smaller and smaller part of our output as comparative politics scholars, I'm not so sure. But you can make up your own mind about that. So that's the first, right? The first task of our predominantly empirical subfield of comparative politics. And the second task is explanation, comparing within categories and comparing across categories in the hope of answering a question about why or how politics works. So a lot of the time that political scientists spend on research and on trying to come to an understanding of how politics works is devoted to producing limited, or what we call parsimonious, explanations, right? We don't want everything and the kitchen sink to be in our explanation, because then it's not a very useful explanation. If I say, well, why did your hair turn white? Well, it turned white for this reason. It was genetics and environment and teaching and, my kids, all these, problems, everything added up to give me the white hair. This is not a helpful explanation. Somebody who wants to avoid getting gray hair is not going to be helped. I need a more parsimonious explanation. But it is also true that the search for parsimony can leave us with explanations that are not adequate, right? Often it is a mixture of factors that provides that, often we need a mixture of factors to really explain why something happened. So one of the big challenges for comparative politics is to balance this desire to give a complete explanation, one that you could actually really use to predict an outcome or to change the course of history. So the desire to give a complete explanation needs to be balanced against the need to give an explanation that is parsimonious, that is simple enough that it can be useful to someone. The first exercise that we know of this kind was actually performed by Aristotle. Aristotle was, in some ways, the founder of comparative global politics. He was interested in why the political systems of different Greek city-states differed, and he was interested in what might be the consequences of having different political systems in different Greek city-states. And he actually divided his Greek city-states into two types: the pure form types and the degenerate form types. The pure form types were those in which the leaders, whoever they were motivated by the desire to do what was right for the whole state, for the whole society. The degenerate forms were those in which the leaders, whoever they might be, were motivated by the desire to do what was best for themselves. So there's the self-interested leader, that's degenerate form, and the selfless, the leader interested in the well-being of the whole society. So one of the patterns that Aristotle discerned was this pattern of some states, some of the Greek city-states had selfish rulers and others had rulers who were interested in the well-being of the whole society. The other thing that Aristotle observed was that some states were ruled by one person alone, some were ruled by a small number of people, and others were ruled by everyone, right? They had popular sovereignty, will of the people, or at least, the people who in ancient Greece qualified as citizens. And this allowed Aristotle to come up with 6 kind of archetypes or 6 ideal forms of government. The pure form of rule of the one. So if you have one single ruler running the show on behalf of the whole nation, that's a monarchy. If you have a few people, did you see that? That was one of these kids going by who gave me the white hair. There she is. If you had a few people, a small number of people ruling on behalf of the whole society, that was aristocracy. If you had a state where there was rule of the many on behalf of the whole people, that's polyarchy. The degenerate forms, those where the rulers were acting on their own behalf and out of self-interest rather than public spiritedness, are tyranny for the one, oligarchy for the few, democracy for the many. So that's Aristotle's descriptive project. And Aristotle also had an explanatory project. He did both halves of comparative global politics. The second question that he asked was, how does the political system affect a very important outcome of politics, which is stability of the state, right? People do better if they live under stable governments. And so he was interested in figuring out, what kind of political system would you recommend to people seeking a stable government? And the answer he came up with through the empirical study of taking, now that he's defined the 6 ideal types, he takes the different Greek city-states and figures out which ones belong in which categories. And then he also looks and says, okay, which ones are the most stable? And if a particular city-state is particularly stable, then its form of government, out of the 6, is going to be more likely to produce stability in general. And what he found, interestingly, is that the most stable of the city-states were city-states that did not fall into any of the 6 categories, but rather had mixtures of oligarchy and polyarchy, or monarchy and oligarchy, or aristocracy, I guess. So the most stable were none of the above, and the least stable were the democracies, so the self-interested rule by the many, and the oligarchies. This is fundamentally the same task that we're going to be undertaking over the course of the semester, looking for detailed information about particular political systems that allows us to discern patterns, categorize political systems, and explain the variation among them. Okay, one way to organize, wait a minute, you're probably wondering, aren't you? What is that thing hanging down the side here? This thing is, this right here. This is the Chinese zodiac. These are little animals showing the different years of the Chinese zodiac. So you know that in China, each year, there's a 12-year cycle, and each year is associated with a different animal, right? There's also a 12-year cycle running at the same time. If you want to know about that, you can ask me when I get home. But anyway, this is the cycle. It starts up there where you can't see it with the mouse, cow, tiger, sheep. No, that's the horse. Dragon, snake. No, that's the horse.
It's the rabbit.
Oh, that was a rabbit. Sorry. This is the rabbit up there. That white one's the rabbit. Then the dragon, then the snake, then the horse, then the sheep. And then comes the monkey, which is the one that we're going to get next. So we're just winding up the year of the sheep. And when Lunar New Year rolls around, we'll be in the year of the monkey. So if you're going to be, nobody in this class is going to be a monkey, I don't think. You'd have to be either turning 12 or turning 24 in this next year. So probably not a monkey. This is the chicken, dog, and pig. And once we get to the year of the pig, we'll start over again with the mouse. Okay, that's what that is. So, what do I want you to do for the rest of the class? What I want you to do is to explore one way that we can organize our thinking about how political systems work. And that is to think about what they do, what their functions are. And to think about that, I want you to think about two questions. What do political systems do? Or what do we want, or what do we think political systems exist for? What is their purpose? What are their functions? We might not always agree with the goals a particular state sets for itself, but in general, states, governments, need to perform certain functions. We can also think about how they perform those functions. And we might also not always approve of the methods a state uses to achieve its goals, but we can still ask the question, what are these methods? And we can also ask a question, how effectively does a particular political system perform the functions that it has decided for itself are the functions it needs to perform? So these are not the only questions we could use to guide our thinking about political systems, but it's an interesting one, and it's where we're going to start. So in a moment, you're going to see a list of groups. And when it appears, you're going to go around the room and find the other members of your group, and you're going to move to sit with those other people. I hope there's at least one laptop in each group. If not, trade personnel around a little bit so that each group has a laptop. If you are not on the list, if you're someone who's still moving into this class, just attach yourself to a group. Attach yourself to a group where you don't already know all the people, okay? So first thing you're going to do is you're going to introduce yourself to each other, and you're going to open a document on one laptop. Only one person needs to really be taking notes, although more people can if you want. Open a document and put your names on it. Sorry about that. Then discuss the questions that are going to appear on the same slide with the group list, and record your answers to these questions on the laptop. And you should take maybe about 15 minutes or 10 minutes for the first one, and another 10 minutes or so for the second one. And at the end, when 11:20 rolls around, one person from each group should email one copy of your group's answers to me, shrigger@davidson.edu. Okay? Well, I'll leave you to it then. On Friday, you're going to have a guest speaker, Dr. Maren Milligan, who's fabulous. She's also teaching a section of Comparative Global Politics this semester, and so she has agreed to step in for me on Friday. On Monday, it's the Martin Luther King holiday. I hope you will all avail yourself of the fantastic programming on campus for that day. And I will see you next Wednesday, and I will have tales of exciting activity on the trail of comparative global politics. All right, so get to work. Bye-bye.